In this video, let's learn how to selectively apply noise reduction and sharpening in an image using multiple layers of the same photo inside of NoNoise AI. So inside of NoNoise AI, I've opened up this image of this duck here. You can see on the left-hand side is the original photograph, and on the right-hand side is the no noise in action. And we can see it's just doing a phenomenal job at, getting all of that noise out of our photograph. We still have all of this great detail in the bird here. So what I want to do with this photograph is I want to add in a bit of sharpening and a bit of detail in here to the bird, but I want to maintain this really soft, noiseless background here. So to do that, to selectively apply some noise reduction and some sharpening, we're going to be using the layers pane inside of NoNoise AI. So what I want to do here is just make sure that this base layer that we're working on right now has the correct amount of sharpening that I want for the photo, or the correct amount of noise reduction and sharpening that I want for that photograph. And basically all we're looking at in this base photo here is the background, because we're actually going to be applying sharpening and some detail selectively using some masking tools into the duck later on. But for right now, all we need to focus on is just this backdrop behind our duck. So everything looks great. The only thing I want to do here is just remove all of the detail and remove all of the sharpening. I need all of the noise reduction there because I don't want any of the noise. But with the detail and the sharpening, we're adding in a little bit of detail to a background that we want to be soft. And we can add in more sharpening and detail to the bird later on when we duplicate that layer. But for right now, I think the background looks great. So now what I want to do is just make sure these settings and these details are locked. So I'm just going to apply them. I'm going to make sure that details pane is red now and that it's locked. Because now I can head up to my layers, and I'm just going to rename this base layer background soft, because it's our background layer and we want it nice and soft. And then I'm going to duplicate this by selecting this duplicate button there. And it's duplicated that layer there. So I have background soft, and then I have this copy of that layer. I'm just going to double click to rename it, and I'll rename this one Duck Sharp. We're going to be using this one to sharpen up that area on the duck, and we're going to be using this background soft to maintain that soft, noiseless background behind the bird. So we've already created our noise reduction and sharpening for this background layer. Now let's add in the sharpening and detail to our duck sharp layer. So first things first, I need to make sure that it's selected here, and then I'm just going to select this Details Adjust button to unlock it. And now I can go in here and I can modify the details. So we have the same details as we had earlier because we just duplicated the same layer. So let's just go down here to our noise reduction detail, and let's just pull that up all the way to bring us all of that nice detail back in the duck. Now let's add in a bit more sharpening as well, just to make sure the smaller textures and all of these little areas of micro contrast in the bird really pop and they stand out in the image. And in this sharpening, we can modify this detail slider here, and this is going to sort of act as a detail size slider. As we pull this up, the detail becomes a little bit more prominent in the frame, and as we pull it back, it kind of softens things up a bit more. So if we pull this up, getting a lot of detail, pull it back, not as much detail. So let's just pull this up quite a bit. That looks pretty good right there. We can always modify the opacity of this sharpness layer later on to make sure things look nice and natural. And one thing to keep in mind when you are doing this is if you do bring in detail and sharpening into an image, there's going to be a bit of noise that comes with those two modifiers. Now, you can see even by pulling up on the amount quite a bit and this enhanced detail all the way, we really don't have the same amount of noise that we did in the original. It's doing a great job of removing that noise, but you can see that we do get a little bit of noise up in here, especially in these areas with kind of just these middle grays. But no big deal. We're going to mask this away from the backdrop and we're actually just going to place it on this bird. But just keep that in mind when you do incorporate detail and sharpening, there's just inherently going to be a little bit of noise that comes with it. So we've modified our duck sharp layer, we've modified our background soft layer. Now we can start masking the two layers together and selectively applying that noise on our photo. So in the layers pane here, I'm just going to make sure that I have this duck sharp layer selected. I'm going to apply those details to lock these details in so that we can modify the layers here. And I'm just going to make sure that duck sharp layer is selected. And then I'm going to go into my masking options here for that duck sharp layer. And that's going to automatically pull up my masking brush for me. If you need to select your masking brush, it's just B on your keyboard, or you can access the masking tools over here on the left-hand side. So I have my masking brush selected. What I want to do here is just move the bird into the center so that I can mask this duck sharpness layer onto our base layer and give this bird some detail while maintaining that noiseless background. So with masking, the basic foundational rule of masking is that white reveals and black conceals. So we can see in here that with this duck sharp layer that we're seeing all of that layer. It's revealing all of that layer in here with this all white mask view. So let's go up here to our masking brush options here, and let's just paint away all of the duck from this duck sharp layer. I'm going to make sure that paint out is selected up here. I'm going to make my size a little bit bigger, around, well, maybe not that big. You can also modify the brush size with the bracket keys on your keyboard, which is a bit easier, especially if you're masking into various sizes like this, but you can also modify it by just dragging this size slider there. Let's increase the feathering all the way to 100. Make sure opacity is at 100 so that we're removing the entirety of whatever we're painting away, and we can just keep our brush size about the size of whatever we're painting. So I'll just use the bracket keys on my keyboard here. And so you can see as I'm painting away, you can see I'm removing all of this detail and sharpening, which is kind of exactly what we don't want to do. But what we're going to do after we brush this out from our duck is we're going to invert this mask, and that's going to apply the details back into the bird. So let's just brush this layer, or brush this duck away from this layer real quick. And that looks good just like that. If I view my mask now, we can see that we've painted away the large majority of this duck, which if there's a few little areas in here that aren't exact, it's not a huge deal. I'm just going to clean these areas up while I have the mask view opened, and then I can view that again. And obviously now we don't have any sharpness in the duck, so it looks, like the duck is soft and the background is detailed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the duck sharp layer, and we're going to invert this mask. And that's going to invert these areas that were white and turn them black. So now if we view our mask, the duck that was black before is now all white. It's revealing this duck sharp layer onto these areas on the duck. So if I turn this duck sharp layer off and on here, you can see it's doing an awesome job of bringing back that detail into all of these nice textures on the duck, but we're not getting any of that noise in the background because we've masked that noise reduction and those sharpening areas away from our background here. So now in our layers pane here, I'm just going to right click this duck sharp layer, and I'm going to select new stamped layer. And what that's going to do is that's going to take these two layers and it's going to duplicate them and then merge those two duplicates together. So I have this one kind of cohesive composite layer, you could say, with the two layers merged together, but then I also maintain the ability to modify those two layers that I was working with earlier. So let's just double click this top layer. We'll name it merged here. And I just wanted to show the noise reduction here from our merge layer and our original. So let's just turn off the duck sharp layer and let's select this background soft layer. And I'm just going to head into the details. I'm going to select adjust. And what I want to do with this background soft layer here is I just want to go in here and remove all of this noise reduction and sharpening just to make everything 0. Let's apply these. And now if I turn off this merge layer, this is our original photograph, and this is the modified version that we made with 2 different layers. You can see especially in the head here, it does a great job of removing all of that noise while bringing in a lot of nice sharpening and detail to those textures and areas of detail on the duck.